Okay, so let's just dive right in. When you think about healing from trauma, what comes to mind? For most of us, it's this idea of digging into the past, right? Finding some painful memory and processing it until it doesn't hurt anymore. But what if that entire idea, what if the very foundation of how we see trauma is built on a myth? In this explainer, we're going to challenge that core belief and explore a really different and honestly, a more hopeful way of understanding how we recover.
You see, the main model for trauma is super intuitive. It's often called the stuck file model. The idea is simple. A traumatic memory is like a corrupted file on a computer, just stuck somewhere in your brain. And healing? Well, healing is the job of a skilled technician, like a therapist, who helps you find that file, open it up, and fix the corrupted data. It makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
But what if it's fundamentally wrong? I mean, what if the brain doesn't work like a computer with a file system at all? And if that's true, what on earth does that mean for how we actually heal? So here's where we're headed. We're going to investigate this myth of stuck trauma, look at a massive historical example of healing without therapists, and then dive into some incredible neuroscience about rewiring versus retrieving. From there, we'll explore the new frontiers of healing this opens up, and we'll land on a powerful new idea of what really updates our system.
All right, let's start with that crack in the foundation. The idea that trauma almost always leads to a chronic condition that has to be professionally treated, well, that's a surprisingly modern idea. And when you actually look at the data, a very, very different story starts to emerge.
Get ready for this number, because it's pretty startling. 65%. According to massive research by a guy named George Bonanno, who looked at 54 separate studies, resilience is actually the most common human response to a potentially traumatic event. About 65% of people show few or even no chronic symptoms. This tells us something huge. Being sick isn't the default outcome. Our natural state is to recover.
And that brings us to a really fascinating historical puzzle. How did entire societies recover from the massive trauma of World War II? I mean, this was long before PTSD was even a diagnosis, and there certainly wasn't an army of trauma therapists around. This whole period is like one giant natural experiment in healing.
So what does the evidence tell us? Well, it suggests that recovery wasn't driven by psychological therapy, but by context. Things like having a job, a real tangible role in rebuilding society, strong community support, and just shared ways of making sense of all the suffering. These were the engines of healing. It was all about moving forward, together.
Now, this quote from the historian Ben Shepard brings up a really provocative point. It suggests that our social systems, things like disability and compensation programs, might actually shape how long trauma lasts. Now, this doesn't minimize anyone's real suffering, not at all, but it forces us to ask a tough question. How might our attempts to help inadvertently get people stuck instead of helping them move on?
Okay, so if history shows us that context is king, what does modern neuroscience have to say? Well, this is where things get really exciting. It's pointing to a complete overhaul of that whole stuck file model. It suggests the goal isn't retrieving a memory at all, but rewiring the entire system.
This slide just lays out the whole paradigm shift perfectly. On one side, you have the old way, trauma as a single broken file that needs to be fixed. But on the other, you have this new model, which is based on how our brains actually learn. Here, trauma is a pattern that's spread across the entire system. So healing isn't about fixing one file, it's about creating the right conditions for the whole system to learn and update itself. It's a total game changer. The science behind all this is a framework called predictive processing, and the core idea is pretty mind-blowing. Your brain isn't just passively soaking up information from the world. No, it's actively predicting it. It's constantly building a model of the world and then just checking for the errors. You know, the difference between what it thought was going to happen and what actually did. So here's the crucial point, the big takeaway. In this new model, trauma isn't a stuck memory of a bad thing that happened. Instead, it's a set of extremely strong, high-precision predictions that the world is a dangerous place. The system becomes so convinced that there's a threat that it just dismisses any new information that says, hey, you're actually safe. You might know you're safe in your conscious mind, but your nervous system just keeps predicting danger because that old prediction is just weighted way too heavily to be updated. And what's so cool is that this new scientific understanding is already creating entirely new frontiers in healing. We're talking about therapies designed not to process old files, but to help the system update its own predictions.
Let's take psychedelic-assisted therapy, for example. The Rebus model here explains how it might work. First, you've got a brain that's stuck in these rigid beliefs or patterns. Then, a substance helps to relax the precision, or the weight, on those old beliefs. This opens up this amazing window where, step 3, the system can reorganize and explore totally new connections. And finally, new, more flexible beliefs can form and stick around. The substance doesn't do the healing, it just creates the perfect conditions for the system to heal itself.
And hey, it's not just psychedelics. This new paradigm helps explain why so many other approaches work too. Somatic therapies see trauma in the body and help complete those physical threat responses. Social models see it as something that happens between people and work to restore connection. And so many indigenous practices see trauma as a collective wound, which is healed through community and ritual. You see, each one in its own way is trying to update the system.
So this brings us to the final, and I think the most important question of all. If healing isn't about processing some old file, then what is it? What are the conditions that actually allow our system to update and move forward?
Well, the new paradigm gives us a pretty clear list. It's a mix of things. It's feeling safe and regulated enough in our own bodies for those old threat predictions to finally relax. It's about relationship and connection. It's having a sense of meaning and purpose. It's about moments of enhanced brain flexibility or neuroplasticity. It's having new experiences that flat out contradict the old, scary predictions. And of course, it's having community support to hold all of that together.
Ultimately, this all leads us to a single, really powerful unifying principle. It's not about finding one magic technique. Whether we're talking about therapy, community, art, or just life itself, the core truth is this simple. What heals is what updates the system. Anything that helps your brain relax its old, rigid predictions and learn something new is, by definition, healing.
And that leaves us with one last powerful question to think about. What if we've been looking in the wrong direction this whole time? What if healing isn't some archaeological dig into the past, but instead it's about being an architect, creating the right conditions, the safety, the connection, the meaning for a new future to be written?